Welcome to Practical Access. I'm Lisa Dieker.
And I'm Rebecca Hines. And Lisa, keeping with our theme this season, I know you have someone that you're excited to present.
Yeah, so I'm actually giddy. That's a great word for today. I'm so happy we were able to get Karen Karp with us, who's a professor in math education, who really does in her work have the intersection of special education and mathematics. So Becky, we don't have enough friends in that area, so we're super happy to have Karen on the call with us today. So thanks for joining us, Karen.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I'm going to start with the first question, and I would just love for you, imagine I'm a brand new teacher, and I have a student in front of me that has a disability in mathematics, and I'm a little intimidated. I'm a general ed teacher. I don't know where to start. What would be your beginning advice for me to think about or to do? Or, you are the expert here. What should I be thinking about as that new novice first year teacher working with kids with disabilities?
Well, you said general education teacher, and that's, an important start because they're the ones who are delivering the math content on one level. But I'd ask that new teacher to partner pretty quickly with a special education teacher in their building and start to develop a partnership with them, because I really believe that that is the best approach. I'm afraid in some cases that a student with disabilities is in kind of a limbo space if we're not careful. That the gen ed teacher might say, well, I don't know that much about special ed, so I'm not sure that this child is fully mine. And then the special ed teacher will say, well, I'm not sure about the math part, so I'm not sure. I think it's the other person's to do. And no one does. And so what we need to do is start a partnership right away, because it's everybody, all in. Everyone's in on this. And so that, I think, is critical. But the main thing is to keep trying different things and be very proactive. The one thing I'm working on right now is math interventions is proactive. It was the original intent of response to intervention that it was preventative and after the medical model, but in fact, that's not how it's played out. It's very reactive, and we wait for a child who's struggling in math, as the one you described, before we act and do anything. Well, we're saying to have little collaborations between the special ed teacher and the gen ed teacher, where they work 2 weeks in advance of new content together, and they prep each other as they're priming for what interventions will take place. And the interventions are not pre-teaching the lesson. We have no goal or no interest in that. They are building in everything that goes into the lesson to come. So, for example, for something like perimeter, what we want to do is have those kids measure just a lot of lengths and just practice with a ruler and constantly be measuring. And we want them also to see that if we add another line to the line they have, they can measure this length and that length. We're not going to do the perimeter thing. We're just prepping them. And then the gen ed teacher, and that's our new teacher on board, the special ed teacher will say, these are the things that I've done with the children in the interventions. Start your first lesson with these. And so we're going to use those as a way to have these kids shine, that these kids are going to do things they just did a few days ago in their intervention class and have already reviewed. And now the new teacher gets to call on those children first. And so we're trying to make it that the children really, really are feeling that the lesson is theirs and not flying over their head at fast speed. And so that new teacher has to learn this new model, proactive intervention. So that's one of the things I'd suggest.
Yeah, I love to hear the word collaboration, Lisa. I harp on collaboration all the time. So your basic tip is let's make sure that we're collaborating to ensure success. Absolutely. And for this young teacher, when they go to a special educator and say, I'm having trouble with X, Y, or Z, I generally would advise them, go with go with the sample of work and don't say, I'm having a problem with this kid. I'm having a problem with the way, with this solution. So do you have ideas? But what do you think is a good entry into that conversation, Karen? How do they go and elicit this help when they might not even know the special educators in the school?
I love your idea of bringing a piece of students' work, because one of the things I always say to all teachers is we're not about fixing children, we're about fixing structures. And so that's why I'm focusing on the structure of the collaboration, because we're not about at all thinking that the child is in some way, the change. It's not that. It's changing everything around the child. And I think that that's quite an important piece. And I may be missing what you're asking.
Yeah. I'll ask that a little more specifically. As a faculty member in special ed, we talk to special ed teachers about collaboration. I don't know that all of the gen ed faculty, when they're preparing teachers, I don't know if they similarly present our special educators as also experts. They're just experts in something different. So as a faculty member who might work with, math education majors, what would you tell them when it comes, like literally, like if you were preparing teachers, how would you tell them to approach a special educator, with a problem?
A total partner. I mean, I really think it's got to be that way. We each have, a collection of information, and we just have to find ways to share it well. And I think that the preparation of both kinds of teachers, the gen ed teacher and the teacher who's gone through special education, is quite different. And so they are definitely differently prepared. And, we can say what's a good thing to do there and what's not. But the reality is that together they have to make this work. And, with many children, it's not only students with disabilities, it takes two people to think about the situation.
Right.
And it could be two gen ed teachers. It could be, I need two more special ed teachers if they're available in the building. And even sometimes paraprofessionals and teaching assistants who are working closely with that particular child. They need to be in on the conversation too.
Oh, good. I think we have a good article to write there.
Yeah.
Bring them
we
all.
have something called the whole school agreement, where we work to get everybody on board across the entire school so that math is taught well, and that special education teachers, paraprofessionals, long-term subs all go to the same math PD as the gen ed teachers.
Love it. I love that.
Fully aware of what's going on. They're not used as subs during a PD event at a school. They are in. They're in it.
There's so many things you said I like. I like the whole school agreement. I like everybody's in. I even like your really strong proactive focus on the strengths of the kid, not the failure of the kid in math. And I think that's so much what the field needs to hear. So I know we agree on this, but I would love to hear your thoughts and help for any teacher, coach, about that kid who we know needs to be in with their peers having discourse, but really struggles in being in with their peers and having discourse. What are some things that you found helpful, especially in the area of math, where, some kids have math anxiety, which we know that literature is high there. What are some things you've seen teachers do, or you would suggest to teachers for that kid who we want them to be sitting next to their peers and having that rich mathematical discourse, but they might struggle with that?
Again, I think some of this proactive work will support all children, but there are complex situations, and we have to think about those as well. The main thing is to use multiple representations for all groups. And I didn't mention this before, but this is a great resource for brand new teachers as well as veteran teachers. But I was involved with a wonderful bunch of other co-authors on the IES practice guide for assisting students struggling in math that just came out about 3 years ago. And in it, we make 6 important recommendations that it's mainly for the elementary school, but it really travels all the way up. And we made 6 important recommendations that teachers should consider that's based on evidence-based research. And one of the ones that I think is the most important, and if I go to a school, I talk about, and when I talk about any child in general, multiple representations. Now, special ed uses, well, may still call this CRA, math educators call it CSA, because the R that is used for representations, they're all representations. Concrete is a representation, abstract is a representation. So that R doesn't really stand for what it really is, which is semi-concrete, like a drawing or a sketch, or sometimes even a chart, depends. And we in math education like to overlap those so that you're seeing concrete, and if I need to, for this particular student, write the equation that goes with it, the first time I will do that. Then I might have a collection of cards that have different equations on it and say, which one do you pick that goes with this model that we just made? Then I get them to write it. So, there's lots of progressions that we can to support that child in moving towards more of an independent ability to handle some of those questions. But there are very, very important models that help children think and do math and take action and make it less anxiety producing, where we're not demanding memory, where we're not demanding time, where we're giving the time to think, and we're giving the supports that are needed with even acting out problems, taking the time to just stop and act it out. A lot of kids, need that role playing. Others just sometimes will say, imagine this situation in your head like a story. And that's helpful too. So there's lots of things we can do to try to bring them into the action part of this. So it's not just rote memorization, and to be frank, things that 10 years from now will be completely done by AI or my watch.
And do you think, Karen, that on those occasions when we have students who individually are struggling, but we suspect that intellectually they're capable of understanding the concept, the broad concepts, but they're just lacking some of the skills, and there may not even be time for them to get all of you caught up in all of those skills. So how do we as instructional coaches, what can we do, or what ideas do you have, whether it's me or I'm bringing a para in to provide support, or even a volunteer to help with the coaching piece to get them caught up on the sideline just a little bit?
Well, one of the things that I think, and this is tangential to your actual question, but I think would be useful in that, is that the IEPs have to be written to be more conceptual. A lot of the times I'm seeing IEPs written, and the IEP is strictly about skills, and it talks about an assessment where we're getting more digits correct than we did yesterday or whenever it was done. And I really ask teachers all over the country, what do you do with that information about the digits? How does it inform your instruction? And none of them can really answer me. It's not doing the trick. So I say, write them more conceptually, talk about place value knowledge and things like that we can really bring the students in on with these materials that we're talking about. And those provide the total foundation for the other components. But it isn't putting kids in a tight kind of situation of constantly be doing algorithms and procedures. And to be frank, those are very elegant ways of doing math, but they are not some of the most joyous things in math sometimes. And I'd like them to experience some of the joy and beauty of the subject too. And they sometimes don't even have an IEP on geometry, which can be for some children the place where they can really, really shine. And I'd like to see more of that. And I also learned, of course, that you can't write the same IEP every year, yet we see this multiplication facts thing travel along. And the Supreme Court came out against that. Same IEP can't be written 2 years in a row or even again. So we need to delve into some of the other things that may in fact be a doorway for children who do have tremendous strengths. I never go in thinking that they can't do it. I always go in thinking they can, and I just have to find a way.
And so my last question, but I want a little bit of commentary with it. So it's funny,
Yeah,
I wish my son growing up could have had you as a math teacher, but my husband and I were literally just talking last night about our son works for Trek and has sold lots of bikes. I'm not allowed to say, but he's one of the top 40 salesmen. And yet I laugh that, he couldn't do his multiplication facts, still can't, but he conceptually struggled, right? And he had a calculator. But I do remember in 5th grade, and I think you'll find this funny, we got a letter and I was like, Josh, I think this is the wrong backpack. And he said, I'm putting your son in gifted math. And I'm like, yeah. But again, he had this amazing teacher in 5th grade. And she said, look, Lisa, he procedurally is not strong, but conceptually, he gets it. He beyond gets it. And so I think it's a good example for our listeners to realize, what Karen's saying is life-changing for kids, because I do think that was a tipping point that allowed him to go to college and do well. And so with that, I just want our listeners to hear, because I got the privilege of chatting with you on the phone before the podcast, I really want them to hear your profound wisdom in the IES report from your perspective. And I would love to put that link out on our podcast when we're done. But could you share with me, if my son were born today and I was sitting there in 3rd grade and he's still trying to do his facts, and I wish I hadn't done flashcards all the way to the gym because it didn't matter, what would you tell me are 6 things I should be thinking about for my son today?
Okay. And some of the recommendations I'll give in general. One is systematic instruction. And by that, I don't mean explicit instruction. I mean giving kids the chance to think and do first, and then I'm here to support them. But to assume that they have strengths that can play into the information that's about to come their way. And so that, is a very important shift that was very different from the last go around on the IES practice guide that came out in 2009. The multiple representations is all over the place in the practice guide. So I've talked a little bit about that already with CSA. And another thing is the language. The precision of language is particularly important. And this goes to that conversation I had about the whole school agreement, where we're all using the same language or not. Like, we're not using borrowing and carrying because they're not conceptually sound. We're using regrouping or trading for place value purposes. Then kids hear it over and over and over and over again, which is precisely what students with disabilities need, and multilingual learners, and everyone else too. We want reducing fractions to be said one year and simplifying the next. We want it to be a smooth stream where everyone knows what's going on, and kids aren't saying such things as math is different every year. It's not. It's a continuum, and we want them to be on it. And then we separated in these recommendations one representation out from the others because the research is so compelling about it, and we want to have all teachers realize K-12, they're responsible for using it officially, and it's the number line. And so we started in kindergarten with number paths, and obviously it moves up to very complicated lines and graphs and other components as they move to middle and high. But that one was pulled out. And then there was another one about solving word problems, that is an important piece of what kids do. And we suggest even using gestures to help them start to see patterns. If I'm dividing and I'm doling out, like I'm dealing out cards, that sharing motion is something that can generalize to other problems. And if you feel like you have to share equally, you might be dividing. And then another one was about fluency activities. It's titled timed activities in the document, but I'm going to be straight with you. I think it should have been called fluency activities because that's what it's about. Timed activities are one component of that, but there's lots of other things that help build students' fluency. And so those are very important. And you told the story of your son, which just reminded me of something that I would like to share. I just returned from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics annual conference and was fortunate to see one of the teachers I've been working with in Tennessee there with 9 of her students with disabilities presenting with her. And they did an unbelievable job. They have just surprised over and over again everyone with their strength and interest in math. They call themselves the math scholars, or the FBI, the fantastically brilliant investigators. Depends on what grade they're in, what name they've created for themselves. But the children love math, see themselves as mathematicians, and were a knockout for everyone who was at that conference. So it's wonderful. It's lots of strengths, lots of strengths.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I think that was our last question. We appreciate not only your wisdom, but I love the FBI. I'm sharing that with everybody in America. I think that's a great name. So if anyone has questions, you can send us a post on our Facebook page at Practical Access, or send us a tweet at Access Practical. Thank you again, Karen, for joining us.
Thank you.
My pleasure.